Hi everyone, Ferris Bueller here with Rhyme Signatures, the nerdiest music review this side of being a public nuisance for an afternoon in downtown Chicago. And today, we're going to be doing a review of the new Major Parkinson album, Valesa Chapter 1, Velvet Prison. Here at Rhyme Signatures well, I say we, but it's not really we, is it? It's Muggins here with a tripod and a phone. Love it when bands shake things up. Well, sometimes we do. Sometimes it offends us on a level that makes us consider taking to the internet to express our displeasure in 280 characters or less, hashtags and everything. But I digress. I genuinely react kind of positively to bands trying out new things. I feel it's a good thing, generally. I was intrigued and delighted at times when Opeth dropped Heritage on us, way back when, or when Anathema cemented their transition away from their typical doom metal sound with Judgment. I reacted with nothing but the most positive of feelings. Mostly, admittedly. Transition to something new and bold can be amongst the best things a band can do to reinvigorate themselves stylistically and creatively. So where does that put Norwegian prog rock staples Major Parkinson? And more importantly, what exactly does this switchover entail? What is this record? And how does Valesa Chapter 1 stand in the increasingly turbulent sea of modern progressive music? I've been quite a big fan of Major Parkinson for a good long while now. I first came across them with their really rather excellent 2014 album Twilight Cinema, and its follow-up in 2017, Black Box. Both I felt represented a nice, overall rather pleasant and quirky take on the traditional prog rock formula, and I consider myself quite a fan of their style and approach to the genre. I dug back into their back catalogue and found that their debut and sophomore records were also pretty excellent, bringing them into the bracket of these rare bands without a single duff record to be found. Until now. Nah, I'm just joshing. Valesa is actually really pretty good. I like it, but just want to preface whatever I say next. Just with that, I do like this record quite a lot. It is not without some glaring faults though, and I'll get into those later. But for now, I just want to talk about what I really like about this. My overall impression and feeling from this record is a positive one. But this is a decidedly a huge jump in what Major Parkinson had become known as to me. I would say probably the best way to describe this record would be kind of like progressive art pop, I suppose. The rock and metal that might have formed a staple of the band's past records has kind of been sort of shoved off to the side a bit in favour of more catchy melodies, more accessible structures, and a bit more of a greater emphasis on shorter songs, with a plethora of some interim tracks between the big hitters. I personally think this is a great switch-up in their approach, and I sincerely applaud the band for taking such a risk, considering what they had spent so much time establishing as their sound up until this point. John Ivar Colberton's husky vocals channels so many gruff and down-to-earth musicians of the past, generating a feeling of, Leonard Cohen meets Roger Waters and Tom Waits. And I feel it works fantastically against the synth and piano that dominates the lead instrumentation of this album. These vocals are traded off against the saccharine suite of Claudia Cox, who provides a really sharp and angular contrast to these downtrodden and morose verses, with her soaring, danceable and memorable choruses throughout the record. I feel this is a really great juxtaposition of singing styles, and honestly, I like it a lot. That being said, I can imagine this would be a pretty hard sticking point for some people. Change is hard, and it can be difficult to adapt to something that a band has shifted to, especially if it is at times so overtly angular to what you may have come to expect from them. Now, I generally try not to look at what anybody said about a record before I review it, but I've seen quite a lot of negative discourse about this record, and I would never dismiss anyone's criticisms of Valesa, because everything's valid, every opinion is valid, but I think regardless of how this album hits you, it's difficult to fault Major Parkinson to want to take a hard handbrake turn into previously uncharted territory for them. The influences on this album can be pretty stark at times, with a great deal of worship of 80s synth-pop and new wave running as a pretty major undercurrent to the entire sound. You'll recognise some of these leads. There's moments on here that feel kind of almost note for note lifted from some of the more popular songs of the era. You'll know it, trust, you will. But thankfully these homages don't stick around for any longer than is required to make you do anything other than point and go, ah, yes. Now, I personally enjoy this fusion of 80s synth-pop with Major Parkinson's progressive sensibilities and album structure. I think it gives a pretty unique take on the genre, and it allows Valesa to stand out strongly in a world of Me Too neo-prog Genesis clones that seem to have kind of saturated the market a bit of late. But it's not just mindless pop music on offer here, with lyrical content as shallow as a birdbath on a hot August afternoon. There's genuinely some really poignant and interesting prose to be found if you really just listen to the lyrics. Behind the admittedly heavy auto-tune on some of Claudia Cox's lines and the near Bruce Springsteen-esque delivery from Colberton lies some really thoughtful and introspective lyrics about the political and social backdrop of the world in the 1980s. But it manages to do so without falling prey to becoming kind of, cringe or embarrassing. The tone of the album, though, is quite bold and celebratory overall. There's some genuinely enormous sounds that really punch out with bombast and joy in places, and it's really nice to hear. Even when you draw this up against the reasonably morose delivery of Colberton's vocals, it's a marvellously well done study in contrast, and it manages to give a little bit of everything stylistically. You've got joy, despair, fury and frustration, as well as this playfulness and a carefree attitude. It is a delight to listen to where each moment will take you, and this emotional maturity and variety is great to hear from what is ostensibly a pop album. The record, as mentioned earlier, though, it's not without faults. And my chief criticism that I want to levy at Valesa is that I feel there's far too many filler tracks to be found. The album is 17 tracks long, which is quite a few, and clocks in at around an hour, which I feel is a respectable runtime, but my concern is that out of these 17 tracks, I only really see maybe 8 or 9 of them to be fully fleshed out or fully realised songs. The remainder manage to serve as like musical interludes or ideas and expressions that honestly just don't get enough time to breathe and become something that stands out to me during the runtime. I personally would have much rather have seen either some of these tracks trimmed completely and reduce the album down to a leaner 45 minutes, or maybe have committed to some of these ideas in full and gone for, I don't know, a double record pushing into the 80-minute range or something like that. It can be frustrating at times as some of these shorter interludes are genuinely really good, but they always sound like they're just getting started before they sizzle out and end without a satisfying bite of what the band was trying to get out with them. Ultimately though, honestly, this is more of a personal gripe with the album than something that I would genuinely describe as being bad. But, Valesa is still a remarkably well-written and interestingly structured record that managed to hold my attention really well, despite my earlier nitpicks, and I do feel overall very positively about this album. I just feel that with a little bit more expansion on some of the ideas within, this could have been a genre-bending classic. But, hey, who knows? This is Valesa Chapter 1, after all. Who knows what Chapter 2 may hold? So, what else can I say about Valesa Chapter 1, Velvet Prison? I enjoyed this record a lot more than I expected myself to. When I heard that this was more of a pop record than what Major Parkinson have done in the past, my subconscious mind did put up some barriers, which it really shouldn't do, as honestly every genre of music is valid and deserving of an unbiased review and criticism. But I was very pleasantly surprised by what is ultimately a thoroughly enjoyable fusion of styles and genres, done by a band that appears expertly equipped to handle this combination that on paper maybe shouldn't even really work that well. Major Parkinson, as far as I am concerned, have maintained their track record of excellence, and for me, they are now 5 for 5 in terms of direct hits. Although this one is a little unusual, even for a band that has built their foundations on the experimental and the daring. Give this one a spin though. Approach it with an open mind, and you just might find yourself enjoying this one a whole bunch. This obviously is all, of course, my opinion. Opinions are great. Tell me, if you've given it a listen, what you thought of this record in the comments down there. If you've got anything else you've listened to this year you think I should check out, do let me know about it. I might get around to giving it my own thoughts. If you did like this video, please do sling the link to anybody who you think might enjoy it. Please do consider giving it a thumbs up as well. That always helps with my metrics. And of course, as always, please do consider subscribing if you want to see more videos like this. Until next time, guys, keep your rhyme signatures odd.